Sophia Evans grew up in a world of comfort and privilege. Her family was the epitome of success, with her father, Richard Evans, running a thriving business empire that provided them with a life of luxury. They lived in a grand estate on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lush gardens and high walls that seemed to keep all the troubles of the world at bay. Sophia, an only child, was the apple of her parents' eyes. Her mother, Emily, was a kind and gentle woman who showered her with love and affection. But life has a way of changing in the blink of an eye. Richard's business, once a pillar of strength, began to crumble under the weight of poor investments and the treachery of those he trusted. The once bustling offices turned quiet as the company's assets were seized, and creditors started circling like vultures. The family's wealth evaporated almost overnight, leaving them teetering on the edge of ruin. Sophia watched helplessly as her father, once a confident and powerful man, grew haggard and despondent. The stress took a toll on Emily's health, and she became frail and bedridden. Their beautiful home was at risk of foreclosure, and there was no money left to pay for Emily's medical bills. The walls that had once protected them now seemed to close in, trapping them in a nightmare from which there was no escape. As the days turned into weeks, Sophia's anxiety grew. She knew she had to do something, anything, to save her family. One evening, while flipping through old family photo albums, she stumbled upon a newspaper article that had been tucked between the pages. The headline read, "Mysterious billionaire Lorenzo De Luca, savior or villain?" The article spoke of a powerful and enigmatic man who had connections to the criminal underworld. He was rumored to be a mafia boss, ruthless and feared by many, but also known for helping those in dire need for a price. The thought of approaching someone like Lorenzo terrified Sophia, but she saw no other way. Her father's pride would never allow him to beg for help, and her mother was too weak to even consider the idea. The burden fell on Sophia's shoulders, and with a heavy heart, she made the decision to meet Lorenzo. That night, she dressed in her finest clothes, hoping to appear confident and composed, even though she was trembling inside. She knew where to find Lorenzo. His presence loomed over the city like a shadow. He owned a luxurious nightclub that was known to be his headquarters. With her mind made up, Sophia took a deep breath and stepped into the lion's den. The nightclub was a world apart from anything Sophia had ever experienced. The dim lighting, the pulsating music, and the whispers of secrets shared in dark corners created an atmosphere that was both intoxicating and intimidating. Sophia felt out of place, but she kept her chin up and approached the bar, where she asked for Lorenzo. The bartender, a burly man with a suspicious gaze, eyed her for a moment before nodding. "Wait here," he said gruffly, before disappearing into a back room. Sophia's heart raced as she waited, every second feeling like an eternity. When the bartender returned, he simply gestured for her to follow him. Sophia was led through a series of hallways to a private office. The door swung open, revealing a spacious room furnished with dark leather and polished wood. Behind a large desk sat Lorenzo De Luca, his piercing blue eyes studying her with a mix of curiosity and amusement. He was strikingly handsome, with a sharp jawline and an air of authority that made the room feel smaller. "So, you're the one who dared to come and see me," Lorenzo said, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "What does a girl like you want from a man like me?" Sophia took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "My family is in trouble, and I don't know where else to turn. I'm willing to do anything, even marry you if that's what it takes." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You're brave, I'll give you that," he replied. "But you should know that being married to me is not a fairy tale. It's dangerous. You're offering your life for your family's sake. Do you understand what that means?" Sophia nodded, her resolve unshaken. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to save them." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed as he considered her words. After a long pause, he nodded. "Very well. I'll take care of your family's debts, but in return, you will be mine." Remember, this is not about love. This is a business arrangement. The wedding was a cold, impersonal affair. There were no flowers, no guests, no joy. It took place in Lorenzo's mansion, a sprawling estate that made Sophia's childhood home look modest in comparison. The ceremony was quick, with only a judge and a few of Lorenzo's men as witnesses. Sophia wore a simple white dress, and Lorenzo was dressed in a sleek black suit. They exchanged vows, but the words felt hollow, devoid of the love and warmth that should accompany such a moment. After the ceremony, Lorenzo escorted Sophia to what would be her new home, a large bedroom at the far end of the mansion. The room was opulent, filled with luxurious furnishings, but it felt empty and cold, much like her new life. Lorenzo made it clear that she was his possession now. He treated her with a detached politeness, never cruel but never warm. He ignored her most of the time, leaving her alone in the vast mansion while he conducted his business. Sophia felt like a ghost, wandering the halls of a place that was meant to be her home, but felt more like a prison. The only time Lorenzo showed any interest in her was at night, when he would come to her room. Their encounters were brief and passionless, driven more by obligation than desire. Afterward, he would leave without a word, returning to his world of power and control, leaving Sophia to her solitude. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Sophia's life with Lorenzo became a monotonous routine of loneliness and despair. She had saved her family, but at what cost? The love she had always dreamed of was nowhere to be found in her cold marriage. Lorenzo remained distant, his heart a fortress that she could not breach. Sophia began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. The man she had married was not just dangerous. He was indifferent to her existence. She had given up her freedom, her dreams, and her happiness for a man who treated her as little more than a trophy. The realization was like a dagger to her heart, and she knew she couldn't live like this any longer. One night, after another silent dinner and an evening spent alone in her room, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't stay in this loveless marriage, not when it was suffocating her spirit. She packed a small bag with a few essentials, leaving behind the luxurious gowns and jewelry that Lorenzo had provided. Before slipping out of the room, she left a note on the bed. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me." With tears in her eyes, Sophia walked out of the mansion, leaving behind the life she had once thought would save her. She didn't know where she was going or what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to reclaim her life, no matter the cost. Sophia's departure from Lorenzo's mansion was the first step towards reclaiming her life. As she walked through the quiet streets in the early morning light, she felt a mix of fear and liberation. She had no plan, no destination in mind, but she knew she couldn't go back to the life she had left behind. The city was vast and unfamiliar, but it also represented a fresh start, an opportunity to rebuild herself far away from the shadows of her past. After traveling for hours, Sophia found herself in a bustling metropolis, a place where she could easily blend in and disappear. She took up residence in a modest apartment in a less affluent part of town, where the anonymity of the crowds offered her a sense of security. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the opulence she had known, but it was hers, and that was enough. Determined to forge a new path, Sophia sought work in the city. Her upbringing had left her unprepared for the harsh realities of survival, but she was resourceful and determined. She eventually found a job as a waitress in a five-star hotel, where the work was hard but honest. The days were long, and the pay was modest, but Sophia relished the independence. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose. As she settled into her new routine, Sophia began to heal from the emotional wounds of her past. She made friends among the hotel staff, people who knew nothing of her former life and treated her as one of their own. Though the memories of her marriage still haunted her, she pushed them aside, focusing on the life she was building. Several months passed, and Sophia's new life began to feel almost normal. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the city and the demands of her job. The hotel had become a second home, a place where she felt safe and valued. But fate had other plans for her, and one day, her carefully constructed world was turned upside down. It was a busy afternoon at the hotel when Sophia's past came crashing back into her life. She was carrying a tray of drinks through the crowded lobby when she turned a corner too quickly and collided with a man who had been walking in the opposite direction. The impact sent the tray flying, spilling its contents all over the man's expensive suit. Sophia gasped and looked up to apologize, only to find herself staring into the cold, familiar eyes of Lorenzo De Luca. Her heart stopped as she realized who she had just bumped into. Time seemed to stand still as they both took in the shock of the moment. "Sophia," Lorenzo said, his voice laced with a mixture of surprise and anger. "What are you doing here?" Sophia's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by fear. But then, something inside her snapped. She had left that life behind, and she wasn't going to let him drag her back into it. "I work here now," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "And I'm sorry about your suit, but I have nothing to say to you." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might lash out. But instead, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sophia trembling in the aftermath of the encounter. Sophia spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to shake the memory of her encounter with Lorenzo. She had hoped never to see him again, yet here he was, a ghost from her past haunting her new life. As the hours dragged on, she tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Later that evening, after her shift had ended, Sophia returned to her apartment, hoping to find solace in the familiar surroundings. But as she approached her door, she found Lorenzo waiting for her, leaning against the wall with a look of determination on his face. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. Sophia hesitated, then nodded and unlocked the door. She led him inside, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. What did he want from her? Why had he come all this way to find her? Once inside, Lorenzo didn't waste any time. "You left without a word," he began, his tone accusatory. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Sophia's anger flared at his words. "What it did to you?" she retorted. "You treated me like I was nothing, Lorenzo. I was just a pawn in your game, a piece of property you could discard when you were done with me. I had to leave to save myself." Lorenzo's expression softened, and for the first time, Sophia saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I know," he admitted quietly. "I know I treated you badly, but you have to understand, my world is dangerous. I kept you at a distance because I didn't want you to get hurt." Sophia shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You hurt me more by pushing me away," she said. "I loved you, Lorenzo, but you made me feel like I was nothing." Lorenzo took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you were gone," he confessed. "I was scared of what I felt, scared of losing control. But when you left, I realized that I don't want to live without you." Sophia's heart ached at his words, but the pain of the past was still too fresh. "I can't just forget everything that happened," she whispered. "You can't expect me to come back to you just like that." "I don't expect that," Lorenzo replied, his voice gentle. "But I want to make things right. Give me a chance to prove that I've changed, that I can be the husband you deserve." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Sophia. Lorenzo didn't pressure her to return to his life, but he made it clear that he wasn't going to give up on her. He began showing up at the hotel regularly, not to intimidate her, but to spend time with her, even if it was just for a few stolen moments between shifts. Lorenzo was different now, more attentive, more open, and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. He started sharing pieces of his life with her, things he had kept hidden behind his impenetrable facade. He told her about his troubled past, the loss of his family, and how he had built his empire from the ground up, always on guard, always alone. As weeks passed, Sophia found herself softening towards him. The anger and hurt that had consumed her began to fade, replaced by a growing understanding of the man he truly was. Lorenzo wasn't just the cold, ruthless mafia boss she had married. He was also a man who had suffered and loved in his own way, even if he hadn't known how to show it. Their relationship began to change. Lorenzo no longer treated Sophia like a possession, but as an equal. He respected her independence and encouraged her to pursue her own dreams. He even offered to help her start her own business, though she politely declined, wanting to succeed on her own terms. Despite her reservations, Sophia couldn't deny the feelings that still lingered between them. Every time they were together, she felt the old sparks reigniting, stronger than ever. But this time it was different. This time, she saw the real Lorenzo, and he was letting her in. The turning point came on a night when Lorenzo invited Sophia to dinner at a quiet, secluded restaurant on the outskirts of the city. It was a far cry from the opulence she had known with him before. The atmosphere was warm and intimate, and Lorenzo seemed more relaxed than she had ever seen him. Over dinner, they talked about everything, about their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. For the first time, Sophia felt like she was truly getting to know the man she had married. Lorenzo was no longer a distant figure, but someone she could see herself building a life with. As the evening drew to a close, Lorenzo took her hand in his touch gentle and reassuring. "Sophia," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I know I've made mistakes and I know I've hurt you, but I love you more than anything in this world. I don't want to lose you again. Will you give me another chance?" Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and love reflected there. The wall she had built around her heart began to crumble, and she knew that she couldn't deny her feelings any longer. Lorenzo had changed. He had shown her that he was capable of love, of tenderness, of being the man she needed him to be. With tears of happiness in her eyes, Sophia nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll give us another chance." Lorenzo smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that warmed her soul. "I promise I'll make you happy, Sophia. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I caused you." As they walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, Sophia felt a sense of peace and contentment that she hadn't known in years. They were starting over, not as the distant, disconnected couple they had once been, but as partners, equals, and lovers. Their journey had been difficult, filled with pain and heartache, but it had also brought them closer together. Sophia knew that their future wouldn't be without challenges, but she was ready to face them with Lorenzo by her side. For the first time, they were truly in love, and nothing could tear them apart. With their hearts reconciled, Sophia and Lorenzo embarked on a new chapter in their lives, determined to build a future together. The transformation in Lorenzo was profound. He no longer kept his emotions locked away. Instead, he openly expressed his love for Sophia, showing her daily how much she meant to him. Their days were filled with laughter, shared moments, and deep conversations as they rediscovered each other in ways they hadn't before. One evening, as they sat on the terrace of their home, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, Lorenzo turned to Sophia, a serious expression on his face. "Sophia," he began, taking her hand in his, "I want to give you the life you deserve. I want to make you happy, to build a family with you. Will you marry me again? This time, properly, with all the love and respect you deserve." Sophia's heart swelled with emotion. She had never imagined that she would be here again, contemplating a life with the man she had once run from. But this Lorenzo was different. He was the man she had always hoped he could be. With tears of joy in her eyes, she nodded. "Yes, Lorenzo, I will marry you again." The wedding was a quiet, intimate affair, held in a beautiful garden on the outskirts of the city. Only their closest friends and family were present, but the love between them filled the air, making the occasion feel grander than any lavish ceremony could. Sophia wore a simple yet elegant dress, and as she walked down the aisle toward Lorenzo, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This time, she knew she was marrying the man she loved, not out of obligation or desperation, but because she truly wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. As Sophia and Lorenzo settled into their new life together, they couldn't ignore the world around them. Lorenzo's involvement in the Mafia was a constant shadow that loomed over their happiness. Though he had promised to distance himself from the more dangerous aspects of his business, he couldn't walk away entirely. The underworld was not one that let its members leave easily. Sophia was aware of the risks, but she trusted Lorenzo's promise to protect her. However, the world they lived in was unpredictable, and the peace they had found was fragile. One evening, as Lorenzo was returning home from a business meeting, he noticed a black car trailing him. His instincts told him something was wrong, and he quickly changed his route, leading the car away from their home. When Lorenzo finally lost the tail, he knew that their past was catching up with them. Someone in his organization was unhappy with his attempts to pull back from the business, and they were making their displeasure known. He didn't tell Sophia about the incident, not wanting to worry her, but he knew he needed to be more vigilant than ever. Despite Lorenzo's efforts to shield Sophia from the dangers of his world, the threat grew more palpable with each passing day. Strange things began to happen. Anonymous phone calls, cars parked outside their home for hours, and rumors circulating within the Mafia that Lorenzo was losing his grip on power. Sophia noticed the tension in Lorenzo, though he tried to hide it. She could see it in the way his eyes darted around whenever they were in public, the way he would suddenly grow quiet, lost in thought. She didn't press him for details, trusting that he would tell her when the time was right. But she couldn't shake the feeling that their happiness was built on unstable ground. One night, as they were lying in bed, Lorenzo finally opened up to her. "Sophia," he said, his voice heavy with concern, "things are getting complicated. There are people who don't like the changes I'm trying to make. I've tried to keep you safe, but I can't protect you from everything. I need you to be careful, to stay close to home." Sophia's heart ached at the worry in his voice. "Lorenzo, I'm not afraid," she said softly, placing her hand on his cheek. "We're in this together. Whatever happens, we'll face it as a team. I trust you to keep us safe." Lorenzo nodded, but deep down, he knew that the danger was closer than ever. He began to make plans to secure their future, quietly arranging for their assets to be moved to safer locations and making sure that Sophia had everything she needed in case something happened to him. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, but he also knew that he couldn't control everything. The storm they had been dreading finally hit one night when Lorenzo was out of town on business. Sophia was home alone, preparing dinner, when she heard a loud crash from the front of the house. Her heart raced as she realized that someone had broken in. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed Lorenzo's number, but there was no answer. As the intruders made their way through the house, Sophia did the only thing she could think of. She hid. She found a small space in the pantry, behind some shelves, and crouched there, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the men talking in low voices, searching for something, perhaps her. Minutes felt like hours as she waited, praying that they wouldn't find her. Finally, the noise stopped, and the house grew eerily quiet. Sophia waited a few more moments before cautiously stepping out of her hiding place. She was shaking, but she knew she needed to see if the intruders were gone. As she crept through the house, she saw the extent of the damage they had done. Drawers were pulled out, furniture overturned, and papers scattered everywhere. It was clear that they had been looking for something, but she couldn't tell what. Just as she was about to call the police, her phone rang. It was Lorenzo. "Sophia, are you okay?" he asked urgently, his voice full of fear. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice trembling. "But the house, it's a mess. They were looking for something." Lorenzo cursed under his breath. "I'm coming home now. Don't move. Stay where you are and lock all the doors." Lorenzo returned home within hours, his mind racing with thoughts of who could have been behind the attack. But when he saw Sophia, all his fears melted away. She was safe, and that was all that mattered. He wrapped her in his arms, holding her close as if to reassure himself that she was really there. Over the next few days, Lorenzo tightened security around their home and began to dig deeper into who might be targeting them. He discovered that a rival within his organization, jealous of his power and embittered by his attempts to reform the Mafia's operations, had orchestrated the attack. But instead of retaliating with violence, Lorenzo did something unexpected. He used his influence to dismantle the rival's network from within, cutting off their resources and isolating them from the rest of the organization. It was a risky move, but it paid off. The rival was soon forced to flee, and the threat to their safety dissipated. Through it all, Sophia remained by Lorenzo's side, her love for him stronger than ever. She knew that their life would never be entirely free of danger, but she also knew that Lorenzo would do anything to protect her. And as long as they were together, she felt they could face anything. In the end, love triumphed over the shadows that had once threatened to tear them apart. Lorenzo kept his promise to Sophia, and they began a new life together, one built on trust, respect, and a deep, unbreakable bond. They moved to a quieter town, far from the reaches of the Mafia, and started a family. Lorenzo left behind the life of crime he had known for so long, choosing instead to focus on the happiness they had found. They had 2 beautiful children, and their days were filled with love and laughter. Sophia and Lorenzo knew that their past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined their future. They had found a way to move forward, together stronger than ever. And as they watched their children play in the garden of their new home, they knew that they had finally found the peace they had been searching for. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.